So it's the best time of year here with the World Juniors that are taking place. We're now in day three of the tournament, and I haven't watched many games from the NTDP over the past 2 weeks or so with just the Christmas holiday, and especially with this tournament going around. Um, I'm pretty much watching all the games from the World Juniors, and because this is really the culmination of a lot of guys from the NTDP, for example. This is, I mean, yeah, you build throughout your 2 years with the NTDP for the double IHF under 18s, which take place in April. Um, but if you look at the U17 group, their biggest tournament of the year, at least in my opinion, should be the World Under 17 Hockey Challenge, which takes place pretty early into their careers with the program. Takes place in November, and it's a tournament hosted by Hockey Canada. But here's the thing: all of the best 16-year-olds are in that tournament, and you have countries like the Swedes, Finland, Russia. Canada does send 3 teams, but point being is you're having a tournament there where you have some of the best on best. And the double IHF under 18s, I understand that there's some players from Canada that aren't there because they're still playing in the CHL playoffs. I get that. But it really comes to a head when you are out of the program and you go to, usually they go to their respective college teams wherever they're committed. Some go the CHL route. You have your one-off where Austin Matthews went to play pro in Switzerland, but he's Austin Matthews. But this is where they all kind of come back together, and I love that there's guys sprinkled in there that didn't come through the NTDP. Look, the NTDP is not the end-all be-all when it comes to some of the best players in the United States, especially with how good the USHL has gotten. Some really good players here and there out of Minnesota high school hockey. Case in point being Casey Middlestat, but he's like the Austin Matthews of Minnesota high school. He's not Austin Matthews. I'm saying as far as where he came from, he's their Austin Matthews example because he was just so good. But a player like Dylan Sandberg, for example, who played Minnesota high school last year, now playing with Minnesota Duluth, I believe. So, there's multiple avenues to make the U.S. World Junior team, and it's just kind of cool to see the guys that you've seen play for the past 2 years or so get a shot to really show what they can do against some of the best players in the entire world at the 18, 19-year-old age group. And, ever since I saw my first World Junior in 2010, where U.S. won gold off of John Carlson's overtime winner, one of the best games I've ever seen at any level. I've never missed a tournament since, and I watch all of USA's games, obviously, all of Canada's, and any other game that I can. And with games being made available on demand and everything nowadays and whatnot, there's really not many games that I miss. So that's going to be the rest of my week, all the way up until pretty much January 5th is solely focused pretty much on the World Juniors. But yeah, I mean, I like what I've seen from this group so far. Team USA is a team now that every single year at this tournament, they're going to send a team that is full of speed, a lot of character guys, a lot of skill. Some people might give them some flack for saying that they believe they're the gold medal favorites each and every year now. But what do you want them to say? No, we're hoping to win bronze. I mean, they're a team now that has been considered in the top 5 as far as the rest of the other countries that are good for a while now. But now, and you even see it with a lot of the hockey analysts, now USA is not just in the top 5, but they're in the top 3 on any given year. I mean, you have Canada, the US, and it flip-flops between either one of the Swedes, Russians, or the Finns to be that third team that has the best chance to win gold. So, looking at the first group, for example, right now, Sweden, I think, is going to, again, go undefeated through the preliminary rounds. They're going to win that group. I don't see any other team in there that's going to beat them and knock them off. The Finns, in my opinion, have been kind of underwhelming this year in this tournament. They they haven't looked as quick. In my opinion, they've looked kind of slow. And it's a small sample size against Denmark, for example, who they just beat, outshot them. Like I think Denmark only had 7 shots, Finland had like 40 something, maybe even 50 something. But and especially when they played Team Canada, I thought they looked kind of slow, and they didn't look like a team that had 5 first-round picks on their blue line, mixed in with some very good skill up front. I think Canada was, in my opinion, for sure the better team there. And I think USA is going to take it to them as well. I mean, maybe that's kind of a bold prediction, but that's what I think. I mean, based on what I've seen from them against Canada and then against Denmark today, and I know it's Denmark, but still, I think if they don't play with more pace and they're quicker with their feet, I can see Team USA winning that game by 4 goals potentially. I think that U.S. team is that good this year. So naturally, when it comes to USA and Canada's group, I think the game tomorrow obviously means a lot, especially for Team Canada. I mean, they're 2-0, and yeah, they play a back-to-back. They play USA, then they play Denmark, but skill alone is going to win that game against Denmark. They're never going to lose to them. And that's a Danish team. It's good to see them still here. They're showing that they can still remain in the top group. And it all started with 2015 when they had guys like Nikolai Ehlers on their team, which really helped them. And then in 2016, they had a good team as well. For Denmark, they had a good team. And I remember in that I think it was a quarterfinal game against Russia, they really took it to them. I mean, the Russians had a good group that year. I mean, Ivan Provorov was one of the guys on the back end, and I think he actually scored a goal late to help them win that game against Denmark. I think that was like a 2-1 game or whatever. Russia was up 2-1, and maybe the Danes scored to make it 2-2 halfway through the third. Then Provorov got that goal. I can't really remember. It's so funny when you watch this tournament each and every year, and when you watch the majority of the games, if not all of them. It's funny how the years kind of blend together, and there's certain moments that you remember. Like I can name who won gold all the years. I know certainly all of USA and then Canada's results and whatnot. But if you look at individually in the preliminary round, especially, it's tough to remember things that happen. All the players that were on those teams. Sometimes you get it mixed up with different years who scored the big goal here or the big goal there. But it's the best time of year. It's the best tournament, in my opinion, as far as hockey is concerned. I love this tournament. And I pretty much fell in love with it since the first one that I saw in 2010. And USA winning that gold medal game helped fuel it for me. And that's what's important for the younger generation of players, too, that are young kids playing hockey, especially here in the States. This tournament has grown a lot here in the U.S. with NHL Network's coverage. I do know the attendance has been poor as far as in Buffalo and whatnot, but that's not indicative of how this tournament has actually grown throughout this country. I mean, all youth hockey players know about this tournament now, and you're going to see a lot more American kids, I think, in the future that eventually end up making this team 7-8 years from now that will say, yeah, I remember watching this tournament back in 2017 when the U.S. won the gold against Canada and Troy Terry, was the shootout hero in kind of both of those contests, which is good to see. I mean, every year Canadians for the longest time have been watching this tournament where it was a relatively unknown thing in the States. Now it's gaining popularity. I know the attendance in Buffalo doesn't show that, but there's a lot more people here that know about this tournament and watch this tournament on an annual basis. So, so to kind of look at some of the players that are on Team USA that have the NTDP connection, guys that are in their last year of World Junior eligibility, players like Fox, for example, Joey Anderson, guys like that who I saw play when they were members of the U17 team. I went to go watch them play against Team Russia at the under 17 Four Nations. The last year that the NTDP was in Ann Arbor at the old Ann Arbor Ice Cube, I went up there and I saw them play Team Russia because I wanted to see that Russian team play live because I had just watched online the TSN feed about a month or so prior at the Under 17 Hockey Challenge, and that was a fantastic gold medal game between the U.S. and the Russians, and I think Russia won that game 2-1, if I'm not mistaken. And so I wanted to go see them play again live, and again, it has this culmination now at the World Juniors where Team Russia has Vitaly Abramov, for example, Dmitry Sokolov, who both were in that game that I saw in Ann Arbor against players like Ryan Lindgren, Adam Fox, and company. So it's cool to watch those guys then and then see them now. And it kind of puts it in a perspective. So when you're watching these guys play when they're 16, 17, you kind of, in your own mind, like to think, okay, now where can this player be 2 years from now? I mean, and there's players that you're right and you're wrong on. Player that I can say that about myself was J.D. Greenway. He was on that team as well with Adam Fox, Lindgren, and I first noticed him in that gold medal game against Russia at the Under 17 Hockey Challenge that year in 2014. And when I saw him play live, first of all, you realize just how big he was. And there was a play where Abramov came down the wing and went to put the puck between his legs, and Greenway just pasted him against the boards. Made a lot of other good plays in that game as well, but point being is, then you see him score that really good goal against Sweden the following year at the Under-18 World Championships in North Dakota. And yeah, I mean, obviously you see him play in between there. Saw him play a few times live when they came to Youngstown to play the Phantoms. But he's a player that I think a lot of us thought would be on this team this year. And, it just didn't turn out for him. There's other players where they're going to be playing on the World Junior roster. A player like Jack Hughes, for example, he could be there as early as next year as an underager. So, he's already played, I think, a couple of games with the U18s this year, and he is a member of the U17 squad, but there was rumblings, especially after his performance at the U17 Hockey Challenge this year, that he would be potentially at the main camp for Team USA. I think after that tournament, he had some lackluster games in the USHL when he was playing against some older, stronger, some faster competition. And so I think the USA Hockey brass thought to themselves, you know what? Realistically, there's not really a place for him here. We'd be bringing him just to bring him. Let's see what he can do next year. And, I expect him to be invited to the Summer Showcase next year and see what he does against those guys in the summer. As well as after a couple of months of the season next year, I think he'll be with the main squad in December. And it's always a benchmark when you reach this tournament, whether you're a 17-year-old, and in the rare cases when, especially for some of the more hockey-developed countries, a 16-year-old that might go. It's a benchmark to see how they play against some of the true best in the world from these other countries at the age of, they're going up against 18, 19-year-olds. And it's not just regular league play, whether it be in, the CHL, USHL, whatever. So, he'll be a guy to watch to potentially see if he's on the roster next year. Some other guys, some early players that I think can be with Team USA next year. They're going to be going their respective routes after this year, like Bodie Wild, for example. He'll get a serious look to play for Team USA next year, as well as I think Adam Samuelson. I think he's a really good defenseman. Plays a pretty good two-way game, so I think he can be there as well. Keandre Miller, he's a player where it's like, who knows? I mean, just because you play for the NTDP doesn't give you an in to play at the World Juniors. Certainly you'll have the international experience. You'll play with and against some very good teams throughout the year. But with how good the USHL's gotten, other players that might play an extra year in, prep school or, Minnesota high school, for example, then go play D1 as an 18-year-old, 19-year-old. if they have a good year against some big, strong guys in college and fast teams as well when they play some of the bigger programs, you'll never know. They could play their way onto one of these teams. You saw um, Riley Walsh, for example, get a good consideration for Team USA. Playing at Harvard this year, he didn't have to play for the NTDP to get a look. He had a really good first half of the year for Harvard and got invited to this team. And at the end of the day, it just wasn't the right fit for him right now. Can he be there next year? Certainly, but I think they chose pretty much a spot-on team this year, and there hasn't been a whole lot of rumblings as to, a controversial player or two that they left off. Usually every single year somebody has a gripe about that, but for the most part they got the team right this year. And next year there's going to be, it's going to be wave after wave now for Team USA. There's going to be a lot of firepower on the team next year. I mean, I think the D-core can look really good again. I think from the team this year, Mikey Anderson and Dylan Sandberg, I don't see them being in the NHL next year. I think they'll be back for Team USA next year. But like I brought up Keandre Miller, he's a guy that is like a kind of a high risk, high reward type player at times. We'll see if he gets a hard look, but other guys that I've mentioned like Wild, Samuelson, Spencer Stastny is a player that I think has made big strides with the NTDP thus far. He can be a really good shutdown guy for the World Junior team next year. I think he'll make the team next year, to be honest with you. Oliver Wahlstrom, I think, will be on the team next year. Jonathan Gruden as well. Jack Hughes, I think he's going to make the team as a draft eligible next year. Jake Wise can be. Joel Farabee, I think you can pencil him as one of the players on the World Junior team next year. I think he's been really, really good. He played at the U18 World Championships last year as an underager there, as did Oliver Wahlstrom. And USA Hockey knows what they're doing when it comes to that at times. I think they see the potential in these kids and they say, hey, bring them up to the next level, have them play some games with the U18 team, maybe against some college opponents as a 16-year-old, and see how they do against that. Because odds are they're going to be leaned on for at least 1 year for Team USA at the World Juniors. Who knows if they'll be in the NHL when they're 19 or not, but I think Joel Farabee will be for sure one of the guys there. Goaltending can be all over the board. Obviously, you have guys like DeRitter and John Moore who are with the program right now, but there could be others that will be in the mix for that. I wish USA Hockey brought a 99 birth year for one of their third goaltenders this year to at least give them experience with the team, have them a chance to actually be there, experience the tournament, the atmosphere, and then kind of work him in as the years go along. But there could be others on the board as well as far as some potential players in the coming years. Players like Brandon McManus, who's a freshman with the University of Minnesota, had a good year in the USHL. I think, there's no way Brandon McManus is a 98. I think he can be available for them next year. Jackson Nelson is another one playing for the Sioux Falls Stampede in the USHL. Tore it up in Minnesota high school hockey a year or two ago. Big kid, he's got some size, got some skill, so he could be one of the odd ones named to the roster potentially, but that's just kind of like a foreshadow as far as some players that I think can be there starting next year and some NTDP names to watch. And again, just because a lot of these guys are playing with the program doesn't mean that they're going to be named to the World Junior team. Doesn't mean that they're the best of the best that we have to offer. Some of these guys for sure are, like guys like Wahlstrom, Farabee, Bodie Wild, Spencer Stastny as far as his D game, Adam Samuelson, guys like that. And some of these guys that don't make the team next year are maybe the guys that aren't invited. They will for sure possibly get a look the following year, when they're 19 and they're in their last year of World Junior eligibility. So also, there could be one-off players that aren't invited one time, but maybe they are the next. So, for example, Chad Chris is a good example of that. He made the team in 2016, I believe, when he was a member of the U18 team. Then the following year, he didn't make it. And then the next year he did, and this year he didn't. I think that's kind of the story of how that goes. But, you know, compare that to a kid like David Ferentz, okay? Here's a kid that got a lot of hype coming into the program turning 16. Played for the Syracuse Stars, where he played his minor midget. Also played some high school with Victor High School in Western New York. You know, there was OHL scouts that went on record saying that if he wasn't committed to Boston University as a 15-year-old and probably going the NTDP route, he could have been chosen in the top 10 or 15 players in the OHL priority selection. But, you know, there's a guy, though, where over the course of his 2 years with the NTDP played very, very well. Similar player to a Chad Chris, for example. He's not the biggest guy, but he's got a lot of skill. He's got good vision. He's got really good offensive instincts. He can do end-to-end rushes. Doesn't play terrible on the defensive side of the puck, but was certainly invited to the summer showcase this year in Plymouth. Played okay, but didn't get named to the December roster. Now, can he make the team next year? Maybe. You know, there'll be other D players that are pushing him as well, but, you know, that's an example of a player that you see come through the NTDP and they're good, and you think he's going to do this next, then do that next, but, you know, I mean, there's a whole talent pool to choose from now that don't always go the NTDP route. So, anyway, it's been a really good tournament so far. If you guys are watching, let me know. Obviously, that USA-Canada game tomorrow is huge, especially for Canada, because if they win that game, they by all means put themselves in the position to win the group. I mean, they're going to win the group if they win tomorrow against Team USA. I don't necessarily like the game being outdoors. I'm not going to get into that. It's a different story. But I think it'd be better if they were inside on that clean ice sheet without the distractions of the outdoor game, and they just went at it, you know, mano-a-mano. But anyway, yeah, so looking forward to the rest of the tournament, you know, thus far, and kind of seeing where things lay out. Hopefully Team USA can win back-to-back golds, and we'll just go from there. But anyway, yeah, that's kind of my thought process on who could be on the team next year, and so on and so forth.